quickly, relatively quickly, and they spend a whole lot of time on it.
Good evening. Excuse me, just real quick. We're going to allow a little bit more time for some additional people to possibly join. It's 5:30. Thank you. We do have some people joining online. So we're going to give it just another beat here, but just ask that you kind of just grab a seat. The kind of structure tonight will be a brief presentation, kind of a summary level overview provided by the consultant, followed by the in kind of focus group exercise station-based areas that we have set up here as well that Samantha and Seth will go into further detail on. But appreciate it. Thank you for coming, and we'll get started here soon. Thank you. Soft. But all start the screen share. Get started. We'll go in. All right. Good evening once again. I'd like to thank everybody for coming tonight. Like I said, initially it's going to be a brief presentation followed by more of an active kind of workshop session as well. And of course, Samantha and Seth, who I'll introduce to start from Michael Baker International, have been our zoning consultants at the inception of this project, which essentially went back to the very beginning of the year when we talked about the RFP process and how the township kind of identified our zoning consultant all the way through to where we are right now. So this is the second of two public outreach meetings. The first one was provided, I think it was a few months ago. That one was more kind of defining the framing of how we were going to be doing the project, so defining process, as well as some just kind of very lay person style information about just what is zoning and how we're going to be proceeding and to kind of explore that for what it means for our township. The township does have a dedicated site, microsite, if you will, on the township website that has all of the depth of information, timeline, project information, resources, recorded sessions that's being recorded right now for this session tonight, as well as contact and subscription information as well. So you can be on the cutting edge of where we're at in the project at all times. But I'd like to thank Samantha and Seth, who came in from Philly and Pittsburgh, who drove in even this morning, right? So that's kind of where they're coming from. Michael Baker is a national organization, but they do have a headquarters in Pittsburgh, right? So that's why they have a depth of understanding and knowledge in Pennsylvania. And that's why we were kind of identified as a top of mind vendor for us. So I'll let them do all the talking about what they're specifically going to be going over tonight. And I'm sure we're all of interest. So we'll do the slide presentation. And Samantha.
Thank you, Chris. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight for the second public outreach meeting for the New Garden Township zoning update. It's great to see so many people in the room excited to talk about zoning. You're my type of people. So tonight, as Chris mentioned, it's September. We're back to school. This is a workshop kind of session. So we're not going to keep you in your seats for that long. We're going to do a brief presentation. If you want to go to the agenda slide, we'll go over the goals of this process. I do recognize a few familiar faces from the last meeting, so it might be a little repeat for you all, but just want to make sure everyone's on the same page in terms of what we want to accomplish throughout this process, what the process looks like, the work that we've done to date, and then we'll set you up for the activities tonight. But the focus tonight is really on the future character zones or areas of the township, which is a precursor to a zoning map. So we're at the very early stages. It's a great point to start giving us your feedback in terms of what you envision for the future of the township. So the purpose of today's meeting is partially informational, right? Partially us sharing information with you, but then the second part is really we want to hear from you. So we want to hear your feedback. So that's the second part of tonight. We get to the next slide. Oops, sorry. Thanks, Chris. Yes. Okay, all the power. Let's see. Okay, so we want to start with the goals of the zoning update. Why is New Garden doing a zoning update right now? So okay, thanks. So there's a few reasons. We'll go through each one. The first is that your township has worked on quite a few different planning efforts throughout the last few years, including the comprehensive plan from 2018, which is a plan that typically is for about a decade. So we're about halfway through that. We've also worked on the Village of Tuffkeneman Streetscape and Transportation Improvement Plan, which really focuses on that village area. And then the township also has an official map, which outlines different potential areas for township acquisition or public improvements. So each of these planning documents is something that they've been done since your last zoning update. And really the zoning should reflect these plans and the township's kind of ideas about the future. So that's part of the reason New Garden decided to do a zoning update right now, to make the ordinance consistent with the existing plans. The next reason, sorry, I don't know what's going on, is to address some of the existing challenges and needs that have been identified by staff and decision makers within the township. So these are, I know it's kind of small on your screen, I apologize. It will be on the website as well. But some of the main challenges and needs that have emerged are, there's an excessive amount of existing non-conforming use, which means that what is currently existing on the ground is not permitted in the current zoning, and it's something that's not necessarily bad in some cases. Like, you want to make those areas conforming. So for example, you have a house, it's in a zone that's and a zone that the house wouldn't be conforming in that zone now. You want to put a deck addition on, it's going to be a lot harder to do that. And we don't want to make that hard for residents. So that's one kind of existing challenge with the code. Additionally, as we all know, there are a lot of by right agricultural facilities that abut residential areas. So there's some tension between kind of the needs of residents and then the needs of those agricultural facilities and the effects and impacts that they have on each other. So it's something that we need to look into with this zoning update. There's a reliance right now on conditional use hearings and zoning hearing boards for special exceptions and variances. And whenever we see a reliance on these tools in the code, we realize that something's not working. These are supposed to be rare, like few and far between. And when they're happening a lot and you're seeing these variances get granted, you want to do some adjusting with your code. There's also just a lack of flexibility when it comes to doing adaptive reuse projects. So taking a structure that might be, maybe used for, a home right now, but maybe it's suited to have a small, low impact business on the first floor and housing on top. It's a little harder to do that now. So we want to look into how we can make use of the structures that are here now, and make sure that they are contributing to the economic vitality of all the residents in the township. There's also quite a few constraints with your existing residential zoning districts. So you have R1, R2, R3 zoning districts, and it's pretty limited in terms of what you can do to encourage different housing typologies. So when I say typologies, I mean everything from a single family detached structure to a townhouse, to a duplex, to a quadplex, ways to introduce what we call missing middle housing. It's like the duplexes, the triplexes, quadplexes, to introduce more housing units to meet the housing needs of existing residents and future residents within the existing kind of architectural character of the neighborhoods. So we're going to be looking into that. I would say that is the missing middle housing kind of goal is something that has emerged in a lot of conversations with the township. It's something I think, your decision makers, your board has been talking about. So this is definitely one of a very important goal in this process. Additionally, the next one is about those agricultural districts and kind of the buffers between agricultural production uses and residential uses. Additionally, there's a lack of a mixed use, planned use, or other kind of blended zoning districts. So in zoning, we have something called Euclidean zoning, and that separates a lot of districts by types of use. So it separates the housing from the businesses, from the industry. A lot of that was meant for public health, safety, and welfare, right? You didn't want to put housing right next to industry. However, in this day and age, when we're trying to encourage walkable communities, in certain areas of the township, especially in the village, Tough Kenneman Village, there's kind of the historic kind of character had a mix of uses. It wasn't solely residential. It wasn't solely business. It was a mix of businesses that served the neighborhood and residential areas. So we want to look at how we can kind of bring back some of that historical pattern back into the areas that make sense in those village centers. And then we want to look at how the zoning aligns with existing infrastructure, but then also future infrastructure needs, including your roads, your stormwater, and your sewer. So that's another huge set of reasons we're looking at a zoning update today. You want to go to the next slide. This is also a really good opportunity to apply some statewide, nationwide, regional best practices and standards. So we want to make sure that your code and your ordinance is simple and easy to navigate, not just to make township staff life easier, but also to make all of your lives easier. Every property owner, business owner might have to look at an ordinance, a zoning ordinance, to determine what can be done on their property. And we want you to be able to read the zoning ordinance just as easily as a zoning officer does. So we want to make sure it's easy to navigate with a limited number of steps in terms of understanding what can be done on your property, but that it's also clear and concise in terms of the language and the standards. And we do that by using kind of simple language, but then also supporting it with graphics that help illustrate concepts. And then we also want it to be flexible. As I mentioned, a lot of zoning codes in the past used to be traditionally Euclidean, use-based zoning. In the zoning world, in the planning world, we're moving towards more of a flexible approach that looks at use, but also form. So a lot of times when people talk about what they love about their neighborhood, it's not the fact that it's all a certain use. It's the fact that there's neat there's trees and sidewalks and the architecture, and I feel like it's really walkable, and I love the brick houses. It's about the form. All of that contributes to a sense of place. So we apply standards that help kind of reinforce that form alongside use. So that is another reason we are doing this update. So next we want to talk about process. So if you're here tonight, you've been connected to this process somewhat, whether it's through the website, through the first meeting, but want to make sure that we're all on the same page in terms of what you can expect tonight and then moving forward. So this process, I'm going to go to the next slide, has 4 main steps. The first step, so we're in the second step, mapping districts. The first step was really about understanding your existing conditions, your existing ordinance. And we did that through working with staff to do a kickoff, going on a site tour. We dived into your zoning ordinance and your past plans, and staff is gonna touch on that in a little bit, and created a zoning diagnosis memo that kind of identified existing potential recommendations for how to align your zoning ordinance with your plans. And then we did something called existing character zones or neighborhood character zones map. So we said, okay, we understand that what might be on your existing zoning map might not match what's on the ground now. So we just want to know what's happening on the ground. So based on our site tour and a geographic information systems analysis of your parcels, we mapped out the existing character of your area. So some areas are lower density residential, some areas are more of a corridor, commercial corridor. So that allowed us to kind of start with a blank slate. And then we used that map. We said, okay, what is happening on the ground now? And is it consistent with what you want to see in the future? And that led us to the future character areas, future character zones map, which is the focus for today. And Seth will elaborate on that now. So we're in the kind of first step. Oh, actually, I think I have a laser on this. First step of the mapping districts, the future character zones map. As you can see, the future character zones map goes right into the future zoning map. And then we will work with and then create future zoning districts articles, and then we'll start in earnest with the drafting of the other articles. So we're about definitely not halfway through, but about a third of the way through the process. So there's plenty of opportunities. You'll see on the right-hand side here, inputs for public engagement. So we had that first public meeting, I think back in August. Your feedback at that meeting helped inform the diagnosis memo. We have another public meeting during today for this stage, the mapping districts. Your feedback is going to help us draft the future zoning map. And then we have an additional 2 public meetings during the drafting process that will be in 2025. So stay tuned for those. Lots of opportunities for input. In addition to 4 additional public input meetings during the adoption process. So plenty of opportunities to get involved. I should note that we're not writing this zoning ordinance or creating these maps at our desks or in a room just with us and staff. We are working with a task force of New Garden Township residents, representatives of the Planning Commission, and other business leaders, other stakeholders to help us guide this process and provide input. We also have a representative from the school district and Chester County on the task force as well. So we meet with them on a regular basis, and all of our meeting slide decks and recordings are on the website. So you can certainly listen to those. Oh, I should mention Chester County is, it's always great to have the county at the table with any of these planning processes, but they are particularly at the table too because part of this update is funded through the county's Vision Partnerships program. So it's great to have their input. I'm gonna go to the next slide. Okay, so I'm gonna hand it over to Seth to talk a little bit about what we've done so far.
Thank you, Sam. Hi, everyone. I'm Seth with Michael Baker. I want to talk about some of the deliverables that we've provided to the task force, the township to date. We've gotten some reviews, some commentary on, we've made some revisions. And we also want to talk about kind of why we're here tonight and what the focus of tonight's conversation is. You can go to the next slide. Sam has talked a lot about the zoning diagnosis memo. This was a document that we prepared from the onset of the project. This is kind of our first step when we do these zoning ordinance updates to make sure we're all on the similar understanding of what the goals of the project are, kind of the background review of information that we need to make sure we're covering so we understand the future vision of the township. And then we provide some initial recommendations and some understanding and some ideas that kind of push us into the next steps. We reviewed those plans that Sam mentioned earlier, the comprehensive plan, the top Kenneman streetscape plan, the official map for the New Garden Township, and the Chester County landscape plan, which does feed into some of the goals and initiatives for the zoning ordinance update project. We also took a deep dive into the existing zoning ordinance as it is today with some conversations with township staff, got an understanding of some of the issue points that they have. We looked at the case of zoning hearing board records to see what those touch points were to where they were seeing some regular issues throughout the township. So gave us a really good understanding of some of the issues that we need to address, and we provided some initial recommendations to deal with those. We also looked at the zoning ordinance and land use development patterns and kind of what's going on in the communities around New Garden, from Avondale all the way down to the Delaware border to Kent Square, just to see what's happening around New Garden and how that could potentially impact this project. And then we developed our vision statement. Chris, you can go to the next slide. The vision statement helps guide this project. It's based, partly on the RFP that was prepared by New Garden to help lead us into this project, and then based on initial conversations with staff and the task force. And this really serves as our sounding board as we work through the decision-making process through the remainder of this project to make sure that we're in line with our vision for this update. The part in bold here states that we are intended to develop a way that meets the objectives of the 2018 comprehensive plan, incorporates best practices for planning, and addresses issues within the existing zoning ordinance, which we've talked about tonight. But we also have to make sure that we are in compliance with the municipality's planning code for the state of Pennsylvania, which is a statewide document that serves to guide regulations for zoning and communities across the entire state. It's a relatively, bare bones document. It provides some structured outlines and how zoning should be adopted and incorporated, how there should be public adoption processes, but it does provide some general guidance and regulations for zoning throughout the state. Additionally, we want to make sure that we're focused on development and redevelopment opportunities along Route 41, the Baltimore Pike Corridor, and incorporating, as Sam mentioned earlier, missing middle housing as a potential option in the township. Next slide there, Chris. Coming out of the zoning diagnosis memo, we folded into our existing character zones map. If you can, you'll see this map kind of floating around tonight. It's also both the diagnosis memo and the existing character zones and the future character zones map, all on the zoning ordinance update on the website. So you can look at those whenever you'd like. If you can look at this closely, you notice that it's not broken down on a parcel level. It's actually broken into half-acre hexagons. Half-acre hexagons, we did half-acre, right? we do 1 acre? 1 acre hexagons. The reason we broke the township up into hexagons, and not only is because hexagons are a shape that fits into a shape the best out of any other shape, but it allowed us to not look at the township on a structured parcel by parcel basis when kind of reviewing character zones. The reason we wanted to do that is because, parcels can transverse what the lines of what we feel a place is. But we wanted to kind of, instead of looking at it that way, try to get an idea of, okay, what do we like about this part of the township? What do we like about this part of the township? How can we define this part of the township? And how can that help guide us through this process and into the future character zones map? We developed a list of character zones based on a number of criteria, came up with names that we thought helped describe that part of the township. And we worked on this back and forth with not only township staff, but the task force to develop it. And we can look through that more tonight as we work through the workstations. Next slide, take this. The focus of tonight is our future character zones map. We have a big printout of the future character zones map in the back left-hand corner. We have post-it notes out there. Please look at that, provide any comments you'd like. But we also have individual stations that define each of the future character zones, provide some examples on development typology, a little bit of a broad understanding and definition of what that character zone would be, and then some potential future land uses. It's not all inclusive, but just to give you an idea of the types of things that we're talking about. Myself, Sam, we have members of the task force here tonight, township staff. We will be around, so if you have questions, please come find us. Look for people with the red name tags on. We'll be happy to talk to you, but we'll be at these stations as well. This followed a similar format of the existing character zones map, that 1 acre hexagon. We wanted to maintain that theme through the development of this map, but when we get into the actual zoning district map, we'll be reverting back to the traditional parcel by parcel basis. That's how zoning maps are developed. Next slide. Sam's going to talk to you a little bit more about next steps. Before we get to that, any questions on those existing deliverables that we've provided up to this point? It's a term that we use on other projects. Sometimes we call them character areas. Sometimes we call them character zones. We didn't want to call them zoning districts because they're not meant to be zoning districts. They're more meant to define how places feel, how places look, how big are our buildings? What types of houses are there? How wide is the street? Is it a largely commercial corridor? Is it a mixed use area? Does it have more of a village setting like in Kenneman? Is it a largely residential area? Is it more higher or medium or lower density compared to other areas of the township? And it can seem similar to zoning in the nomenclature that's used, but it's not meant to be a traditional zoning. Does that make sense? Does that help? It helps. We can talk about it more. I'd be happy to talk. One more. Yeah, that's a great question. We have the existing protected agricultural areas that were one of the initial layers that we used in the development of the character zones map to say this is protected agricultural property. It is identified as such, so we're going to put it in that character zone. We use that as one of kind of the bounding layers to define the map itself because we have access to that information. Areas of the township that are agriculture, but maybe not protected, could be identified as different types of character areas depending on what's around it or the vision of the township. And you can look at those areas on the workstations behind you tonight. As long as that easement stays in place, correct, yeah.
And actually something, we'd be happy to talk about the Hamlet character zone all day. I think it's one of our favorites. But part of kind of what we're envisioning for that area, and we love your feedback, is sometimes people refer to them as conservation subdivisions or cluster developments where you're preserving existing, whether it's farmland or open space, and then developing in a clustered area. So that could be the case and kind of what we were thinking with some of those easements, where those easements would stay in place in the areas that they exist, and then their development would happen alongside. Potentially. Yeah, but that's kind of that's like the idea. Yeah. So I should mention, Seth did a great job, like if you're looking at the map and you're thinking, whoa, that's like not what's there now, we acknowledge that. That's why the existing character area zone map allowed us to identify what's there now. And then if it didn't align with kind of what we were hearing and reading about the goals of the township, that's where you see the changes kind of happening. Saying, because a zoning district map is supposed to, it's a vision for your future and the vision of what you want to be there in the future, not necessarily what's there now if it doesn't align, if what's there now doesn't align with what you want to see in the future. So yeah, as Seth said, we're gonna be around, so we can definitely have more conversations. But I do want to touch on next steps real quick, because we won't be reconvening as a group until the end of the night. You'll be free to kind of walk around and then leave when you need to. But I do want to make sure that you all have all the information about how to stay involved. So in terms of next steps from our project team's end and the task force, after getting your feedback tonight, we're going to start drafting the zoning districts, the map, and then the ordinance articles. And then we'll see you in early 2025, spring 2025, to get some feedback on what we've worked on in the meantime. If you actually, out of curiosity, how many people have been on the website? Cool. Awesome. Glad to see. If you haven't visited the website, you can get to it through the township's website very easily on the community development.
I can pull that up right now if you want some.
Great. Yeah, show you how to get there.
So you can either take your phone out and take that QR code now if you want to just kind of map it. But I mean, obviously on the township website, which hopefully everybody's been to, our new bright, beautiful website that we turned online at the beginning of the year. But under the departments, kind of in our mega menu here, go under community development safety, and it's right here. So it's a pretty quick navigation to get there. It's going to give you the leaving the site because, of course, this is a pad site provided by the Michael Baker team. And then this is kind of, I'll call it the complete dumping zone of all project information based off of its kind of category about the project. So historic kind of elements that led into starting it, updates. This information will be part of a new update provided forward. Public outreach, just kind of these meetings tonight, everything will be shared here. And then, of course, all the resources, everything that Seth mentioned about deliverables that we're going to be providing, everything's going to be bucketed here. And of course, what I really want to kind of continue to press is registering and signing up for information. So that's one where, as a kind of a anecdotal show of hands here, how many people learned about tonight's meeting from like the Facebook post? How many people learned about it by just because you sign up to our website information, you got like an email or something like that, but a newsletter information? How many people saw the road sign?
Hey.
There we go. We're continuing to try to fine tune how people channel and get information around there. So if you have inputs about that, please come see me about what you think would be helpful to kind of continue to get the word out to the masses. I think if anything you could take away is we're not trying to hide anything here. This is trying to be as engaging as possible and transparent and recorded as possible. So that's kind of what we're trying to emphasize as a staff, to make sure that this is brokered in a very open and transparent manner. So continue to give us input about how we're doing and getting information out there, because this is considered to be a very important project that we need to get all inputs that we can provide. So when we do get to that end state where it's part of the public hearing and finality of the project, the last thing we want is, well, I never learned about this. What are you guys doing? So that's kind of so if you do have any other inputs, let me know, but otherwise I'll hand it back over.
Actually, Chris, could you go to the resources tab
Sure.
again and scroll down? So to the reference layer map. And then if you want, in the layers tab, if you want the one right next to it, you want to toggle that on so people, so this interactive map on the website was a direct result of the last public meeting. And I think it was you, Chris, right, that asked for, like, it would be really helpful if I could have a map that has all like different layers and I can understand, where the trails are, where the existing zoning districts are. So this map is something that we're going to continue to update. It has everything from parcels, floodplains, farm easements, but it also has the existing character zones map and the future character zones map. And then once we have the zoning districts map ready for review and feedback, it'll be on here. So you can toggle these on and off and zoom in as much as you want. So yeah, any other kind of thoughts that you have about how we can make this process a little more accessible, please let us know. So we're game to try it. Um,
reflect on this as well. What leads the township and municipality, specifically those with people who want to update their zoning? What are some of the key prerogatives, issues, realities that bring your group in to help them do?
So I'll kind of start by saying, so the township kind of adopted zoning in 1987, and then over time, it's only been really kind of tweaked and adjusted. It's never really been kind of reassessed and readdressed. So the fact that it's been that long since we even discussed this as a comprehensive understanding of where we're at today, that's kind of what started the conversation. And then really based off of the incoming new staff, new perception, these are the summary of things that we're just dealing with. I don't know if people think it costs the township money to run as many zoning hearing boards as we do. We lose money on those because of the depth of requirements of legal representation as well as court recordings and stuff. And we do way more than we should be doing per year. We average about a few a month, and it should be like once or twice every quarter or whatnot. We were really heavy this year. I think it was a big one. So that, in addition to the fact that we have a lot of, and you don't see it at a macro level, but the granular level, when people come in and they want to do different things with their properties. Hey, my property can only be X, Y, and Z. When they learn that, they kind of reflect that, that's a product of the zoning issues that they have. That was evidenced by, and also just kind of the ordering of reversing different types of functions out of an existing property is another one. So this is a helpful tool to be able to provide landowners, property owners, a maximization of what they can do with their property, not just today, but possibly in the future. So we're trying to kind of ungovern or unrestrict that by having it be sensible based off of where things should be and where we want them at a kind of a 10,000 level foot view in the township, but then give that freedom and flexibility within that for just the eventual turnover of property, the eventual turnover of different people coming in. So it's not like we are restricting the use of property 20 years from now by rules that were set forth in 1987, if that makes sense. So it's just all of that combined led us to go through this process. And this actually started as a public discussion, and I think it was in the winter of last year. We started putting the RFP out for bid. And that was in December when we actually got that out there.
Thank you, Chris. So basically, it's a municipality's comprehensive plan needs to be aligned very closely with with the rules and regulations regarding what can go here, what can go here. Is that pretty much what you've done?
So the Pennsylvania Municipalities Planning Code requires municipalities to do a comprehensive plan about every decade or so. And then typically, if it's done right, the zoning follows the comprehensive plan and is in line with that comprehensive plan.
That's also one where if you go through the comprehensive plan, a lot of the recommendations are improving zoning criterion. Like that's, and it just, since we adopted it in 2018, a lot of that hadn't really been done across the board. So it's throughout. But I also want to be cognizant of the time remaining. So we'd have until 7 specifically, and I want to make sure we have a lot of time for questions and floor exercise here.
Could you go to the last couple of slides? Yes. Okay. So the fun stuff. We have 4 stations in the back. You can visit them at your leisure. We're not going to ring a bell every 5 minutes and have you move on. So try to spread out initially so you're not all huddled around the same one. But at those stations, we have a station on the future character zones map, the map itself, and then on different character zones. So purely residential zones, mixed use village zones, mixed use areas, and what we're calling special areas. Those are the open space and the airport areas. And at each station, you're going to see a description of that zone along with potential land uses that we're thinking about, as well as a location map of where you can find that zone in the township, and then visual examples of that zone. We want your feedback, and the best way to get that feedback, and a way that we're gonna remember and be able to, tabulate and bring back to the task force is if you fill out your worksheets. So there's a page for each character zone as well as the character zone map. And you'll be asked to just provide your feedback on the land uses, the kind of visual or the photos that we provide, as well as kind of leave any open-ended comments that you wish. We are around. We do have iPads that we can bring up the interactive map if you want to zoom into a specific area. So just flag us down. But with that, as Chris said, you have until 7 to visit the stations. Let us know if you have any questions. We're happy to answer it.
And Samantha, just for everybody that's online, we have about a dozen or so watching right now. And obviously this is an in-person exercise, but we can put the forms as well as some of the visuals in the resources area, whatever page it makes sense, they can fill it out and then send it in via email or whatnot, and we can take those inputs as well. So we will be going offline starting now to kind of govern the exercise here. But for those watching, they can provide that input that way. So
Yes, thank you. All right, thank you all.